I did have a case. Do you remember during the pandemic, FDA issued some tweets that said, "You're not a horse, you're not a cow.
I do remember that.
Stop it with the ivermectin."
Yes.
Well, they were sued over that.
Did you defend them in that?
I did. I was somewhat successful. I actually won my case. Then they appealed, and the different officer handles appeals were also they really shouldn't be saying, "Don't date this drug." They'll often use something like tweets as like a vehicle to pursue a broader agenda.
What's behind the agenda, I don't know, but it's evil.
I do think it was a purposeful, coordinated attack into PR to get the shot in every arm. Talk to your doctor, not the government agency.
Well, they put out that tweet. That was probably the most successful public relations campaign that any health agency ever did.
The Food and Drug Administration had to put out an unusual warning to Americans this week. They tweeted, quote, "You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Seriously, y'all, stop it." They're talking about people who've been using ivermectin, a drug usually used for deworming horses and livestock, to treat COVID-19.
During the COVID pandemic, propaganda, deceit, and fear were rampant. But when a cheap Nobel Prize-winning wonder drug began to emerge as a hopeful treatment, the media, the government, and Big Pharma went to war against it. The FDA launched a public relations attack campaign against the drug, spreading the horse medicine lie. That is, until a group of doctors sued the FDA, and one restricting the agency's ability to act as America's doctor. In today's Project Veritas undercover report, meet the doctors who fought back, and hear the FDA's attorney as he reveals what he really thinks about the FDA's PR campaign and the now notorious medicine, ivermectin.
There was some legitimate problem with what FDA did. An agency can only do what it has statutory authorization to do. Like FDA can only do what Congress said it can do. That's it. The argument was that FDA didn't have authority to tell people not to take a certain drug. It's okay for FDA to communicate information about the drug, but it's not okay to take the next step and actually tell people you should not take this drug. Because making a recommendation on what drugs to take or not to take, that's the practice of medicine. And FDA can't practice medicine.
He acknowledges that the FDA was out of line. Well, I practiced emergency medicine for over 40 years, and I retired from that in July of 2020. I've done more than 15,000 patient consultations for COVID. However, treating with ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine went against the government narrative. So the government's apparent agenda since the start of this has been to force everybody, regardless of whether it makes any sense, to get these COVID so-called vaccines, which we now know are poison jabs.
So how did they lose the appeal then?
So if what the agency has done is like totally beyond the pale, like there is no authority whatsoever to do that. Like unquestionably beyond its authority.
One thing that struck me at both cases is how immature and inexperienced the lawyers were for the FDA.
Well, we settled the case, but we settled it largely on our terms. They had to take down the offensive tweets and the offending public relations campaign. Unfortunately, they didn't really change their policy about ivermectin, and I'm still faced with fighting the medical boards and the licensing boards over my license for using ivermectin for COVID, in spite of the fact that they haven't been able to identify a single patient that has a complaint against me or a single adverse outcome.
Now I've treated over 6,000 COVID patients, and I can say none of my patients have been hospitalized because of using ivermectin, contrary to what Isaac reports in that video. It's one of the safest medications I've ever used. I have far more problems with people calling me about side effects from antibiotics than I do from ivermectin.
Well, they got an opinion that was good for them. That kind of limited FDA's authority.
Oh.
So they got a good result from the courts. They originally wanted more. But then once they got an opinion that was good for them, so once they got that opinion, the actual tweets I don't really care that much about. Because like they'll often use something like tweets as like a vehicle to pursue a broader agenda. I think going forward, they'll probably be a bit more careful. They really shouldn't be saying, don't take this drug. What they should say, which isn't that different, but it's safer, we should say, this drug can be very dangerous. Like, provide information. Say, like, this drug is dangerous. There's no evidence to show that it works, but there is evidence that it can be very harmful. You could die from this drug. That's all fine. Just don't take the next step of saying the recommendation, don't take this drug. That's like one step too far.
Well, ivermectin is one of the safest medications that we prescribe. It's demonstrably safer than Tylenol or aspirin or ibuprofen. In fact, there haven't been any documented cases of death from overdose of ivermectin, pure overdose. Bringing some of these topics to a new audience, I think, is worthwhile. You know, how effective early treatment was suppressed and hundreds of thousands of lives were cost because of that, and how the agenda has been to push a harmful vaccine that's caused, again, at least hundreds of thousands of excess deaths in this country, increased disability by millions. It's important to keep bringing this forward. And I think there needs to be accountability. There needs to be some wholesale change in our public health approach in this country. So there are only 2 countries in the world where direct advertising of prescription medicines to consumers is allowed. That's New Zealand and the United States. Big Pharma got that approval to do that, not just because they want to sell drugs, probably even more than that, because they want to be a major source of funding for the media, which they are. So they basically control the message that the media gives out because they've got the money.
One thing this case did is set a precedent. I think it permanently tarnished the reputation of the FDA. I think the public takes the FDA a little less seriously now, and it keeps them from making the same bold, reckless move in the future when it comes to telling patients what they can and cannot do. Like Isaac said, and like we have all said, the FDA is not your doctor. The FDA has no business telling patients what they can take. And we proved in the court of law that they cannot do that.